Language learners everywhere, we are way too hard on yourselves, and I hope that this video will give you the reassurance, solidarity that you need in order to keep going on your language learning journey, especially if you feel like you want to be always productive. You have to fill all of those amounts of small pockets in your day to feel worthy, also fearing to lose what I've already studied, and then all my hard work in the past will be for nothing. All of this video is for you. I didn't study all last week, and I definitely have taken different pockets of breaks that have lasted from 3 months up until even a year, depending on what language it is. This is not something that's talked about in the language learning communities that I followed for ever since I started my language learning journey. They always talk about finding the smallest pockets of time, like every 5 minutes or 30 minutes during your commute, etc. I know that I've talked about, using and benefiting from those pockets of time that you do have that are free in your day, even when you are having a super busy day. There is value in that and knowing how to manage your time. There's also the other side of the coin where we're just like, I'm really tired. And Heidi in her podcast definitely addresses this very gracefully, and she puts it so beautifully. So if you do want more solidarity after this video, go and check out her podcast too for her newest episode. But for me, I think it's been a while since I have felt this kind of frustration or panic and anxiety around the fact of not studying all the time or feeling guilty for not filling those pockets of time that I have in my day with language learning. Sometimes I just feel super tired and I am used to saying, okay, I'm going to take a break. It is okay. And I have been establishing really that way of being for the past few years. And I do coach language learners on the side who have brought this up to me thinking, well, I have to be studying all the time, or I feel unproductive, or I feel like this whole process is discouraging because I'm not using my time wisely. But again, I'm so tired at the end of the day, and really just finding these conflicts of time management and following all of the advice that language learners as well as, productivity gurus online tell us, matched with what is the actual energy that we need to do all of this. What is wrong with having just silence around when you are super tired? Then I realized after all of these worries were brought up from people that I had been coaching, it reminded me of how I used to feel. And I want to walk you guys sort of through the process that I always have to go through in order to reconcile with these feelings that are really hard to handle, especially as language learners when we are generally a very ambitious, goal-oriented group. Just knowing how tiring adult life can truly be outside of our language learning. The majority of language learners that I have communicated with throughout the years, their job does not have anything to do with language learning. Sometimes they live in a family where another language is not spoken besides their own language. And so there's not a ton of time to include language learning every single day or even every week. But I do find myself sometimes saying, I am genuinely tired and I have had so much stimuli thrown at me throughout the day. I have had all of these really small tasks. As children, we take for granted the amount of energy that even a simple task can take. Even going to the supermarket to buy groceries for the week, that still takes energy. That still takes a commitment. That still takes your head telling you and trying to remind you constantly, don't forget to do this, otherwise you're going to be without food for the week. Even just those really small daily tasks that we take for granted when we probably took for granted from what our parents were doing to provide for us, they take energy and time. And sometimes I just really want to listen to my favorite music in my native language, English, or sometimes I just want silence. Learning a language and all of the resources and podcasts and YouTube videos that were made to learn languages, that is still stimuli. That is still getting your brain to work, even in those moments where you do have some peace away from your day-to-day life and all of those daily tasks and work. I will listen to podcasts about, self-development or psychology. Those are some of my favorite topics to kind of relax my brain in a sense, even though I want something on in the background. It's best for me to listen to it in English because I find that my soul internalizes it a lot more than if I were to listen to it in any other language, even in German. And German is my best foreign language, I would say, but I just don't always agree with the fact of, oh, I'm doing this in my native language, but I could be doing it in another language. I think that's helpful whenever we are trying to find motivation and we really are at the point where our energy is wanting us to really hyper-focus on language learning. There are always different seasons in our life, as I tell, about where our energy is, where our focus and priorities are. So sometimes when my my energy is all ready for language learning all the time. And I can really feel like I have the energy to devote outside of my everyday priorities to listen to even more stimuli during my breaks for language learning, then that's what I'll do, right? I'll turn on a podcast that is in a different language that might be about psychology, self-development. But there are times, a lot of times in my year, especially looking at this year right now, where I really just want to slow down. I want to enjoy the moment. I don't want my brain to be on the whole time. And for years, I felt guilty about even consuming content in English. I felt guilty about being surrounded by people who only spoke English. I felt even guilty for having to go back to the United States where the main language to function is English, not having any language learning people or like resources around me, and I had to make a lot more effort to find them. That kind of pressure and guilt on myself all the time, it was so tiring. I mean, it added to what I was already being tired about from my everyday tasks that I had to get done. And nowadays I'm just like, you know what? It is really the slowing down and the self-awareness, the self-compassion that I have for myself that has led me to the conclusion it's okay to take time for myself to just sit with the silence and honor my introverted energy as well. And I think part of that mindfulness and self-compassion that I started to bring into my own language learning, it was like, I want to set that boundary with myself. You know, we always talk about setting boundaries with other people, but I also wanted to start setting boundaries with myself, especially boundaries that I knew if I crossed those boundaries would get me into negative headspaces that I was really already habituated to, with being anxious and feeling guilty, not studying all the time or not being surrounded by opportunities to study languages all the time. You know, an example of that boundary would be really using some of my free time to just be. Listen to an English podcast that has nothing to do with language study, listening to nothing, listening to my favorite music when I was a kid that was all in English on the commute home instead of doing another Chinese Pimsleur lesson. Setting the boundary and committing to it that I commit to my own joy first instead of my pride and my hustle with language learning nowadays. There was also another time when I had a work retreat really recently, and it was 4 days of nonstop being with people. And even when I went to my Airbnb, there were still people that I was sharing that space with. So it wasn't really mine, even though it was a retreat in a sense where there were like fun excursions. It was really not that relaxing, that we were still learning about things of how we could do the job better. I just did not have time to rest. Of course, I may have downloaded a few movies that were dubbed in other languages on the plane ride over to the work retreat, but that was really all I did. I did not have energy for 4 days to even do anything else with languages. I also observed just when I used to teach a lot in the evenings, and that really took my energy away from me as well. So that even when I did have a commute going back home after teaching in the evenings, I did not want to listen to anything. And I knew that it was going to be okay. And in the end, it brought me a lot more joy. It gave me the opportunity to practice that self-compassion and acceptance of how my energy really can be whenever I'm tired. Just because you don't study languages sometimes, or that it's been a while since you have, if you wanted to put everything aside one day and you didn't want to do anything with languages, that doesn't mean you aren't a language learner. That doesn't mean that this path for learning is not meant for you. That doesn't mean you're bad at it, or that you don't have what it takes to do it, or that you're a failure or you're unproductive. All of those labels that we put on ourselves. You don't have to always study languages, language learners. You won't be able to study all the time anyways due to life, energy, other constraints. So I want you to say right now, I give myself the permission and flexibility to do what I want, to have the control in my studies that I know that I had the whole time. It's just, I think when we have so many expectations of what language learning really is supposed to look like, what a language learner is supposed to do, what we're supposed to do, coming from all of the labels that outside influence has been giving us our whole lives, that's when it gets really tricky. But I want us always to remember, especially on this channel, I talk about language tips, resources where you can find things for different languages. All of that is so important for the success of a language learning journey. I talk about mindfulness in regards to my own language learning story with my own adoption, but it is all to say that all of that should be under the umbrella of being mindful, being aware, and really knowing how to be gentle to ourselves. And part of that is really knowing I am not alone in this. This is the common humanity of so many language learners. And I really want this video to be an admittedly ranty video to show everyone that even with me on my 9th language, and I've been doing this almost 9 years with language learning, I still feel like I don't want to study languages all the time. Does that mean that I'm not the same language learner that I was when I was studying 6 languages in a day and always like around languages, working with them, talking? That doesn't mean anything. It's just a different season of life, and you are literally right where you need to be. And I always say your language learning story matters no matter where you are in your journey, really knowing that there is a shared humanity here and that we can have more control than we think we do. Those are really the starting points for unlocking that true joy and really knowing ourselves within our own language learning journey too. You're not a failure language learner. You are right where you need to be. Even if you decided not to study one day or one week, you are exactly in the place that was meant for you at this moment. Please let me know your comments down below, what you thought of this video, what resonated with you. Again, we are sharing all of our experiences here, and I want this to be a conversation. So I invite you to write anything that you need down in the comments. Otherwise, please give this video a like as well as a subscribe, because I love talking about the mindfulness and really the psychological aspects that go behind language learning. But I do slowly want to pivot the channel around more mindfulness topics like this one. I will see you next time in a new video.